Okay, so that's you first, Patricia, you second, dear Ginny, and Anando third.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So were you saying something, Flatura, or are you, because you're muted?
No, I said I can be third.
Anyhow is fine with me.
Okay.
So, Flatura, do you want to be third?
Well, I didn't think you were part of the opening speeches.
No.
No, that's no. I mean, you come in with everybody else.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. No, we're okay. We're just getting confused about who's doing what.
Okay.
So it's okay. So it's
Flatura,
Patricia, Yahya, and myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Flatura, who is a voice from Albania, will be chiming in later on when we open it up. You three guys are speaking for the whole colonized world at the moment.
Sounds like a very heavy task.
Sorry, Patricia?
It sounds like a very heavy task.
Well, it's been a heavy task to be colonized, Patricia.
No.
I'm sorry, Dick. I'm really sorry. So we have to take we have to speak with someone first, someone second, someone third, or something like this.
No, we've got just three people who are going to start us off, who are going to talk for about 10-15 minutes each, and then it's going to be open like a
okay
live
okay no okay okay no, I don't need 15 minutes to speak. I will be with the crowd.
So, Dick, will you frame it? How do we start?
Sorry, how?
Yeah, will you frame something and then?
I'll say something briefly and introduce you three, and then I'll try and stop you within a maximum of 15 minutes if you go on for too long, and then we're going to just throw it open for people to have a big discussion. So you can come back again and join in that. But I wanted three voices from different parts of the world where group analysis is developing to introduce the issues.
Okay. Right. We'll do that.
I mean, you talk about a responsibility. When I talked to you guys in South Africa a few weeks back, I arrived at the Zoom and I said to Monica, "Good morning, Cape Town." And she said, "It isn't just Cape Town, it's the whole of South Africa." And I said, "My God, can I live up to this?"
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really hope that we can generate some discussion. I have more questions than anything, which I hope people will be able to engage. Yeah.
I think a lot of this is about questions, because I've already seen what Anando's done, and it's mostly a series of questions about how we're going to proceed with group analysis coming from Europe into other parts of the world, and all the questions that really raises that we're going to have to address if it's going to be a successful enterprise. But I also think we have decolonizing issues at home in London, where group analysis in a way exists in a kind of bubble that is quite cut off from some of the more deprived communities and some of the different cultural communities in the UK, it's still a very white middle class discourse. So we're trying to decolonise the London centre in London, as well as looking at how group analysis is going to develop in the rest of the world.
Okay, so I really hope we have a good discussion. I think I'm too excited, and I hope I don't do anything strange.
The stranger the better, Patricia.
We need excitement. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
And butterflies.
No, I come from a very conservative background, so doing strange things are...
Patricia, I know how provocative you can be. Come on.
Sorry, I didn't catch.
I said, oh, please, Patricia, I know how provocative you can be. Like stoke the coals.
But anyway, okay. Okay.
I just like the way Yaya is dressed.
Oh.
Have you guys met before?
Sorry?
No. Have you guys met before between Rwanda and South Africa?
No.
Ah, okay.
No, we haven't.
That's interesting.
I think at the last, at the Berlin Symposium, I met 2 people from Rwanda. But also very briefly. It was such a huge symposium. It felt very bewildering, you know, in the sense that one couldn't really have in-depth conversations. And also because I am a glutton, you know, it's like first time at the symposium and I wanted to attend all the sessions, which is impossible. So that by the end of the day, you know, there was no space for new things in my head. And I got to know some of the other smokers a little bit better, because in between sessions we will run out and, you know, quickly have a puff, and and that was the extent of my socialization. Yeah.
I think we were only able to get 2 people from Rwanda to Berlin, weren't we? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
did you make Berlin, Diogen?
Yes.
You were there, yeah. But
Yes,
only one other from your group.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what? Did we kind of fly past each other in the corridor? Or did we actually say hello? Did we actually say hello?
Hi.
I'm asking whether we actually said hello in the corridors.
You mean during the symposium?
Yeah.
Okay, people start to
I don't remember well.
That's a lot. Yeah. Are people starting to come in?
It looks like there's loads of people coming in.
Oh my God! It's like somebody just opened the, the floodwater gate.
It's like a football ground. Everybody's flooding in and filling all the seats.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Hi.
And it just started pouring here.
Hi, Bruce.
Ananda.
Oh, hi, Hello, Teresa.
Start my video. All the usual suspects, I see.
That was exactly.
I was thinking.
Hello, Sally. Hello, Faraday. Hello, Teresa.
Hi, John.
Hello, Julia.
Hi. Hi.
Hello, Justin.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, Dick.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dick.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Erica. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Erico. Hi, Erico.
Hi. Fancy. Yeah. We are.
I'm just waiting a couple of minutes to see if there's anybody else to arrive, and then we can start. You're all in control of your own muting, so you can unmute yourselves whenever you want to speak. I think on past experiences, it may be that it works better for the acoustics if people mute themselves for the first part, at least, when we're having kind of introductory talks, and then I think it gets a bit difficult to have to keep unmuting yourself every time you want to speak in a bigger discussion. So we'll see how it goes after that point. Okay, let's make a start. My idea about wanting to put on this workshop was partly because of issues that we have in London around race and culture and racism, and the sense that in London we have a version of group analysis that is a very white middle class version and very much cut off from the inner city and from the more troubled and depressed areas of the city and indeed of English society. So there's been a feeling of a need for some time in London to actually decolonize what we're doing there, the way we do training, the way we think about group analysis. And then there's a second issue, equally, if not more important, which is how we're starting to have group analytic trainings in different parts of the world. And I think the decolonizing process is an international one, really, that it's difficult ultimately to separate decolonizing group analysis in London from decolonizing it in the way that it impacts in countries that have been formally colonized by the British or other European powers. So we've got 3 people are going to start us off with brief introductory presentations. I hope are going to be around 10 to 15 minutes each. And then we've got the rest of the time together to have an open discussion about the issues that are raised. So we're going to start with Patricia from South Africa, and then we're going to go with Diogene from Rwanda, and then Anando from India. So are you ready to go, Patricia, if I hand over to you? I can't see you on my screen, but I'm hoping you're there somewhere. Patricia, we've lost you.
I'm here.
Ah, right, okay. I'm handing over to you. You have the floor, or the screen, or whatever it is.
A very intimidating screen, and it reminds me of when the invitation came to be part of this discussion, I was so excited, because it's really something very close to my heart. And what I did was I went and fetched all the books that I could find on decolonization, on what does it mean to think about, or just to think and be from an African perspective. And then I actually felt that I was going a little bit mad, and stopped and asked myself a different question. So what does a German refugee in England during one of, the Second Great European War have to do with me in this little bit of Africa, in the southern point? What does he have to offer me? What was it that made me find some resonance in what he was saying? And then another thought came up, is that in terms of South Africa, thinking about what it is to live and work here, one can't escape the issue of race. Our social unconscious here is permeated. We are so racialized. And how do I think about that within this group analytic frame? And I think it was 5 years ago, we had a student uprising where the students started calling for decolonizing of academia. And I suppose it wasn't surprising that they then revisited works by Fanon and Steve Biko. But I didn't recognize how they were using it. So I needed to think as well about what is happening between the generations in South Africa, that we have stopped talking to each other. And so what is it then that we are delivering? And the big question then became for me, what is a decolonizing practice in South Africa? What would it look like? And the first part of that is decolonizing one's mind. And that's a very difficult task, because what I did in terms of trying to think about what we're going to talk about today, I think is a very good example of how my mind is colonized. That the gaze is always outward. I needed to go and read what other people wrote about it. And then also then a very strange realization that perhaps what Fuchs wrote resonated for me because it is something that I've always felt intuitively, that groups have healing properties, but I needed someone from elsewhere to validate that for me. I could not start my thinking about the potential of groups to rewire and to re-examine how we live here and how we work here. It is hard work to kind of be reflexively aware of what one is doing all the time, and how much of that lives within one's own head. The next part of that would be to decentralize. You know, how do we decentralize praxis? And here, talking about the center being Europe, we were colonized by England, and later by the Afrikaner, who would also claim that they were colonized by the English. How do we decentralize our thought so that what we build, or that our context and our environment remains the center of what we do, and our praxis develops out of that? And then, of course, how do we put it then together? How do we remember all of the little bits and pieces that has been deposited elsewhere and not within our own minds, within our own lived experiences? Because all of those things would really affect how we do things like recruit, select, what boundaries. Because the one thing about, it's a very interesting thing, we always discuss boundaries in terms of setting up groups and what it means and so on. What came to me is that how we experience boundaries here, and what makes it then difficult to hold the classical boundary. And I'm calling it classical, or maybe I should call it something else, but as it is in the textbooks, as it is written by Fuchs and by everybody else that developed on his theory, we have a different sense of boundary. And we come from a history where people were put into selected spaces according to race. We also come from an experience where colonial administrators, colonial powers, decided on the borders of a country very arbitrarily, that found sort of people suddenly in a different country. So how do we then think about what a boundary for a group should look like? And how does it meet where we find our groups? The same thing with selection criteria. One of the things that I have experienced in working with groups here is that sometimes we find our groups not through selection, and we have to work with it. And what does selection mean? That inclusion and exclusion, and bearing in mind that the theory was developed in a clinical setting. How do we want to use groups in a clinical setting, in community settings, and what does that mean? The other sort of like very, I think, important thing that we are grappling with is language. We have 11 languages, or 11 official languages. And in 1976, when the students, revolted against the use of Afrikaans as the main medium of instruction, they didn't revolt against English, though. And a lot of us have lost our languages. It is very difficult to find people who can write in the non, what do I call it? In the South African languages, other than Afrikaans. Because we were all taught in English and had to learn English, so that the head and heart language doesn't correspond. And in our groups, that is what we struggle with. And the interesting thing is, particularly in our large groups, language becomes a very contentious issue. And it doesn't matter that everybody can speak and understand English, but the fact that you are communicating in a language that is not that's not your mother tongue becomes a very contentious issue. And it would, because it also becomes such a great beacon or banner for exclusion. I think in 2016, there was the South African Journal for Psychoanalysis had one whole edition dedicated to group work, and everybody who wrote about how difficult it is, and in thinking how difficult it is to run groups in South Africa. They were not psychoanalytical run groups, but so in thinking about this here, we, in selecting group members, we want diversity, we want, we select according to a certain criteria, and it is a group of strangers that we want to put together. We are used to groups, but not groups of strangers. And do we need to revisit that? Do we need to revisit how we put our groups together, or whether putting together a group of strangers is what we should do? For most of us, individuation occurs within groups. The group that you belong to want you to become a person who can stand on her own 2 feet. Individuation does not mean that you break away from your group, but that you become a person of value within your group. So is that perhaps something that we need to look at? And what I would put forward is that the process of decolonizing anything can't even pronounce it now, needs to start with decolonizing. So we need to start decolonizing decolonization. And develop a very reflexive, critical praxis that will continually and continuously ask questions of our context as well as of ourselves. And I think I would leave it at that.
Thanks, Patricia. It's a really good introduction. I think you've raised so many very important issues there that are much deeper than kind of just superficial issues about colonial history and so on, and about how we think about these issues. I'm going to pass it on to Diogene from Rwanda. Over to you.
You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I was just saying that as Dick said, Diogene from Rwanda. I'm sorry to say that I was not really much prepared. I was informed that I joined this group yesterday as a speaker. I kept reflecting on what I can really say about the topic, so which was somehow, let me say, intimidating to self for some reasons. Looking at just the word colonization and decolonization, as Patricia said, it triggers some memories of colonialism, especially for Africa. That's one that intimidated me somehow. But also looking at the theme itself, it really ends with a question mark. So then I was wondering what I can really say or what I can add after that question mark. If it was a statement, it could be easier for me, but since there was that question mark, it was really more complex. So then I just decided to add some more questions. But before I go to the questions that I raised in me, I would say that as far as we talk of colonization and decolonization of group analysis, I was looking at in the perspective of dominance or depriving the freedom from someone or from something. So then I was wondering who is dominating who as far as this theme is concerned, or who is dominating what, or what is dominating who, or what is dominating what. Those are really questions that arise in me. I also thought that probably apart from this dominance or domination, so probably there's someone who may feel privileged or something that may be privileged. Is it a specific culture? Is it a specific group or people? But I also came up to think that probably it is group analysis that is privileged. So then I try to read more on what some people like Fuchs says about group analysis, where he says that group analysis is concerned with a dynamic understanding. With that, I thought that of course, this is a society that would remain multiracial, multicultural, and also multi-religious. And also looking at the matrix theory, where folks says that without the matrix, the group analysis itself can collapse. It also shows how much we need to integrate the diversity in terms of language, diversity in terms of values, the values of people, and diversity in terms of the way of thinking, in terms of culture. How much do we consider the people's culture, and diversity in terms of the ways of thinking, the ways of doing things, and also diversity in terms of wealth. I remember when last time when I was in the Symposium in Berlin, one of the concerns that were raised was the representation of Africa in the Symposium, where very few people, coming from Africa. So which to me really meant a lot, because of course, looking at Africa, where people experience more violence, it means that it is really a place where it is expected to have more and more of this kind of approaches. But looking at the representation of Africa in that specific symposium, as it was even discussed, I thought it is also something that we need to work on, making sure that all the corners of the world are really, represented. But I was also thinking that looking at most of international tools that are developed and used, and also concepts, you can't really find them in our local languages, local context. People have their ways of, describing things, saying things, and sometimes the way people say things may not really fit in the general concepts. So then I was reflecting on how these can also be part of what need to be considered, how the concept and tools can be contextualized, and they consider the local context. I can't really close without appreciating the fact that we currently have the group analysis in Rwanda. We have a number of people who are doing the intermediate groups, and others who are currently starting, who are doing the introductory phase. So I really do appreciate that like Rwanda has been considered, and group analysis has started here. So I would conclude thanking Justin. I've seen Justin here, and MJ and Anne, as people who have really been supporting us, especially in Rwanda, in this group analysis. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diogenes, and thank you for doing so well in with so little advance notice. I should have said when I introduced Diogenes that the speaker we had lined up from Rwanda was injured in a car accident only about 48 hours ago. So we had to prevail on Diogenes at incredibly short notice to fill in for her. So thank you very much, not only for what you've said, but for being ready to step in a bit of a crisis. Okay, over to you, Anando.
Right. I'm going to read in the 14th century, the world had entered the age of discovery and exploration. The British and European countries began to seek out new lands. Sounds nice. But 500 years and counting, we're still struggling with the memories and experiences of bloodshed, exploitation, slavery, the plundering of natural resources, and the exercise of power and supremacy over others. I wonder where the spirit of the explorers got lost and turned into motivations of control. But they took their cannons and gunpowder with them, apparently to protect themselves from danger. So perhaps the spirit was to conquer rather than to explore. Quite often, I have heard these two words, exploration and discovery, being used in group analysis. Our course in India started 2 years ago. It is in English, which is the second language for us. Our journey began with Shama and I attending the Berlin conference in 2017, where the bursary committee waived off the full conference fee and a colleague hosted us for all 5 days. Despite this, we were still paying back a loan for the trip for the next 6 months. When we met colleagues whose names we had only heard of as the gods and goddesses of group analysis, it was like a pilgrimage complete. And their excitement to see us was like they were meeting people from an exotic land. That was the first time I felt an anger. Perhaps the first time I got in touch with the oppression of my colonial history, English and European. Another person asked me where I was from, and I said, India. He asked, an Indian from India? I said, yes. He said, are you really in India? I said, no, just in my imagination. This is my reality. I usually travel to group analysis conferences with a suitcase in my hand. I was being sarcastic. Then I was told he was one of the gods of group analysis as well. I felt horrible. How could I talk like that? I wanted to go and give him some of the laddus and pickle I had brought as gifts. I remember the initial conversations where Shama was asked, how would it be possible to start a group analytic training in India as English language would be a problem? How would they speak to us? I wanted to remind them that the email we were writing was in English and that the colonizers did a good job before they left by setting up missionary educational institutions. I again felt that we had to appease the group analytic gods, or they would get angry and their wrath would mean our prayers of starting a group analytic course in India would not be answered. Were we tired of the religion of psychiatry which dominates our land and desperate to be liberated from this, and the religion of group analysis was the answer to all our troubles? But we started, and our course is in its second year with 25 in the cohort from 14 regions of India, and it is in English. It is very expensive, and so only caters to those who are from the upper economic class of India. And that is only half the expense. We still need to raise the rest. But apart from this, Will the process involve knowledge flowing unidirectionally, or would the learning be truly cross-cultural? Will the larger community consider questioning their beliefs about what is group analysis and how it is to be taught and practiced? Would they accept changing some of these standardized manuals of training and certification? Will the GA community accept our challenges to existing theory? Would we be appreciated for raising a voice, rebelling, protesting, and even creating new order? Or will our course become a curse in the GA community? Whenever I hear the words exploration and discovery, I like the words, but something also sends a shiver down my spine. And the question that bothers me is, will the group analysis explorers colonize our thoughts and ideas? It is inevitable that we will have to engage in very difficult conversations, especially as we again begin to trust in an authority with whom we have had a painful past. My hope is that we will be able to think and dialogue about the process of developing as group analysts without having to always refer to who trained us and in which British or European standard we match up to as a mark of our quality certification. Colonialism is the policy of a country seeking to extend or retain its authority over other people or territories. I myself am a perfect product of colonization. I think in English, and I do not know how to read or write my first language, Bengali. My great-grandfather was a senior officer in the French army in India, fighting the Indians. Their policy was to use Indians against themselves. Does British European group analysis have a policy? And is that to retain the authority of the British and European group analytic theory and practice? The aim of colonialism is dominance. Within group analysis, is there a master-slave relationship between the British and European training institutes and those whom they certify? In the process of colonization, colonizers may impose their religion, economics, and other cultural practices on the indigenous peoples. Will the language, religion, and culture of group analysis with its traditions, rituals, and holy books of theories be imposed on us to learn, memorize, and quote so that we can also call ourselves group analysts? In colonization, foreign administrators rule the territory in pursuit of their interests, seeking to benefit from the colonized region's people and resources. Will the group and analytic administrators decide who qualifies as a group analyst, depending on how well we have learned this group analytic religion? Will they incorporate parts of the new lands tradition and cultural wealth and call it their own through first publications? And might we then become internalized British European group analysts? Would we be Anglo-Saxon group analysts then? Thank you.
Thank you, Anando. That's a very interesting question you end with. So we've got we've got another 50 minutes for discussion. So it's now open in the manner of a large group to discuss this whole issue of decolonizing group analysis. Over to you.
Well, I just want to say to all of the speakers how moved I feel, very close to tears. And I'm not black, but I did grow up in a colonized country. But I just feel really moved by what you've said and really feel that you've put your finger on some really important issues that we've been struggling with for a long time here in England. Yeah, thank you.
I want to say to Patricia how much I loved what you said. Almost everything, but also you know, when you said how you went to the books, how that's a sign of colonization and power. And I remember when I studied 45 years ago, kind of writing a thesis and saying I'm not going to use any books that say the same thing that I want to say. It just reminded me how passionate I used to feel about those kind of things. And the boundary, I thought that was so brilliant what you said about the boundary issue, which is in itself a kind of colonizing act also in England.
Yeah. Just the idea of the boundary is often used as a kind of instrument of control.
Yeah.
It determines what's legitimate, what's not, what's, you know, what's proper group analysis, what isn't. And they are written into our holy books. So it does, but hopefully not entirely, but potentially it could be used as an instrument of subjugation.
Yeah.
And I was really struck, Ananda, thought it was a brilliant talk by what you said about the relationship, whether, you know, it's going to be just unidirectional, you know, the people coming from the West to bring their knowledge in their suitcases to give to the Indians. And, but whether there'd be a cross-cultural conversation. And it's an obvious thing when you say it, but I was also thinking what a novel idea, you know, because the kind of idea seems to be that the colonizer goes out to, you know, to give their gifts to the natives and so on. But of course they steal from them and make it their own. But they do it in a way that it doesn't become obvious what they're taking from them. But how I'm part of the staff on the India thing, and we're just starting the first seminar now next week. In the reading is the first 2 chapters of Liesl Hurst and Harold Baer's book, and one of the chapters is a little history of groups. And even now, you know, in our very first baby steps, just thinking you know, this is a Western history of groups. You know, it's American, British, as though these are the only places that groups have taken place in.
Yeah.
As though this whole, I don't know, ways of being with others, essentially, aren't they? They're just ways of being with others that we then somehow reify in the notion of a group, and then double reify as group analysis. And then, you know, and you have to have done our training to belong to this club, to be called a group analyst, not a group therapist. I mean, you know, all sorts of people can become group therapists, but to be a real group analyst and so on. So it's a project, you know, I'm only just sort of beginning to get my head around what an enormous, that we can't do this training without immersing ourselves in the decolonizing project. And what you said, Patricia, about, you know, starting with your mind, that of course is true of myself as well. You know, like Ananda, I speak English, I dream in English. My mother tongue I can hardly read and hardly speak now, and so on. So, you know, I read anyway.
I'm thinking about, why is this subplenary not a keynote lecture?
Right.
And what does that mean? Yeah, I just wanted to say that question.
What answer might you suggest?
Did you hear the question, Maria?
No, sorry.
Farhad said, what answer would you suggest?
That it's a thorny issue, that it's not comfortable to really think about it. And I'm also thinking about my position on that, because sometimes I have the impression that maybe I'm not right, because I feel like on the sidelines, because in Germany, we have lots of German books, and we have also a German tradition of group psychotherapy, which is a little different from group analysis. So maybe in a way I'm a little more independent regarding maybe the UK group analytic approach. But I'm here, because I think it's really important, and it really resonates with me, the topic, and maybe I'm still in the process of figuring out why that is. But Dick and Teresa and many people, I've been on the forum for 3 years now, and this has come up again and again, and I feel the reluctance of many people to really engage with that topic, because it's about, as the brilliant speakers said, it's about power, hierarchy, dependence, independence, critical thinking, and so on. And and looking in the mirror is not easy.
But Maria, I'm very aware that you come from East Germany and what that means in Germany after your education. And that's not a difficult thing, not an easy thing to talk about.
Yes. As the next keynote speaker, I think the question that's been asked, Maria, hi. Is a really interesting one, and I think it's not only. I hope I will be raising some of these issues, not as powerfully probably or eloquently as the three speakers have just done, and I want to thank Dick for convening this subplenary workshop. And I did ask myself that same question, but I think it's also something about form, isn't it? That really is a challenge for us in a group analytic conference. How could you do a workshop? Well, we have the large group, but the convention, the genre of a keynote speaker is as an individual. And what does that say about cultural assumptions?
Yeah.
I think what Patricia was saying about the reformulation of absolute core concepts and ideas within our models, structured within our models that largely go unquestioned, like concepts like individuation, they demand critical interrogation and radical reformulation. To explore and discover. Wow, I'll never be able to use those terms again without thinking about their colonial, thoroughgoing colonial resonances. Really, thank you, Anando. But yeah, there are core ideas of sort of modern Eurocentric individualism structured in there that some of us try and bang on about now and again when we're allowed to. But then how to reformulate those, or to pluralize group analysis in a way that retains an understanding that it is group analysis, but there's not one kind.
I'd like to say there's not even one kind in Britain. I didn't train at the Institute of Group Analysis, and I'm often made to feel like a second-class citizen because of it. So there's battles to be fought in Britain too.
Know about that one, yeah.
But I was also thinking, Patricia, when you were, well, when all three speakers were talking, particularly around the issue of boundaries, as somebody who, myself, who works with medium and larger groups, when people try to impose very strict rules and boundaries, to use that word, and ways of understanding that come from small group therapy. And I can see how when we work with a medium group or a larger group, it's a very different frame, very different context where those things do not apply. And it is a place where the context and culture have a big input. So there are different ways of thinking about it, and I didn't do the formal training either.
Well, I think, am I unmuted? I think sorry. When I was thinking about why the issue of boundaries are so problematic,
yeah,
and what is contributing towards the problem, the problematic, and then one of my colleagues, we started sort of talking about the kinds of groups that we are used to, and really, if we talk about your your first experience in a group, your family, and then how sort of like with different types of groups, what are the things. So for instance, different communities have different ways of having family meetings. And in order to have a successful family meeting, all people have to be given equality. If each voice within that family meeting doesn't carry the same weight, you do not reach a resolution. You end up with conflict, because then all the family, all the old family fights resurface, and most of the time those meetings are called to resolve an issue, to get to a decision. And then it becomes very important that everybody's got equal voice. And I suppose that is all, that is part of the issue, the equality or the value of the voices that's in conversation. And I don't know if equality is something that one can put on a plate and give to someone, or whether it is something that you take, or whether it is something that you negotiate. What I do know is that if you've had a history of not having enough value, it is difficult to take it, even if it's given to you on a plate or a serving platter. It's then difficult to take it.
Yeah.
And that is part of just clearing one's mind, I think. It's it's like doing a house cleaning. We are very notorious for doing house cleaning in summer here. You take everything out of the house and wash it down, and it feels like that is what needs to happen, so that you can, I don't know, reevaluate, reassign value, or appreciate the value of what lies underneath the muck.
It really problematizes the whole idea of training, doesn't it? in the sense that the notion of training presupposes a kind of established body of knowledge, which you then give to others. And what this sort of, I don't know what to call it, this sort of conversation that Dick has initiated shows that, you know, it's a sort of, throws a critical light on the so-called established body of knowledge. So Teresa, when you spoke a bit earlier, and you said, well, you know, so there's the theory of small groups, which is inappropriately applied to medium and large groups, say when you're talking boundaries. So, well, even in that statement, it sort of presupposes that the the small group system is established. You know, it's but the light that this throws on it is a very deep and critical light. You know, it's questioning. It's, you know, really so many of our kind of precious, taken for granted notions, you know, about the attitude of the therapist, the corrective emotional experience, that, you know, many traditions, like if a therapist makes an act of gesture of kindness to another, then this is decreed to be an acting out, for example, or, you know, all these sorts of premises that are part of the analytic norm, which I think a lot in the UK anyway continues to be taught as established, not just wisdom, but established fact of technique and so on. All of that is deeply problematic. And you know, going back to Maria's question, is because that this is happening, as it were, in the corridors, not in the main room. Because it just gets shuffled off, because you know, psychotherapy, although we keep going on about group analysis being social and all of that, it's a amputated social, isn't it? It's a social that is apolitical. It's a depoliticized social, and I would say the majority of our colleagues, as soon as they hear the word politics, run 100 miles in the other direction. You know, talk about Palestine and Israel would be a very difficult conversation to have. You know, yesterday we welcome all these Palestinian colleagues, but they live very different lives to the lives most of us are living. You know, they're living under the gun, quite literally, and so on. But so should this be part of group analysis, or is this another conversation to be had in another little room on the side, an even smaller room than this one?
I'm wondering how we got to give such importance to theory, and how we have deified it. And you know, like Ananda, you talk so well about the hierarchy and how you met the gods of group analysis, and we made theories to be gods, not living entities that we examine and add to and change. And if we how come that we've given it so much power? Maybe that is part of the colonizing project. I don't know.
I'd like to try and figure out some things for myself. I mentioned in the large group last night that I was born in South Africa and I live in Israel now. And in both societies, I feel that I have white privilege. And there's been a lot of talk about white privilege lately, and it's been worrying me a great deal. On the one hand, I feel an enormous identification with people who have suffered and who, back in South Africa and in Palestine today, and I feel guilty about the white privilege. On the other hand, it's really very difficult. I also run from political involvement, even though I have recently begun to demonstrate against our Prime Minister, and feel that I'm sort of drawn into a small, narrow world of my therapy groups and my therapy patients. I just finished the 4-year course, and I have to do a final paper. And I'm doing it on the social unconscious and exploring what happened in my therapy group when I introduced a member who wasn't part of the white privilege group. and the group is going bananas. People want to leave. People are demonstratively silent. I think what I'm trying to say is that on the one hand, I feel white privilege and I feel guilty about it. On the other hand, most of the time, my world is smaller. And it's only when I read the articles or come to a symposium like this that I see that I get into conflict. I do want to say that it fills me with warmth and happiness to see that group analysis is going into countries like South Africa and Rwanda and India. It does give me hope. That's it.
I think I had really a parallelism. I don't know, I was thinking of this, I'm an Islam believer, and I was thinking of this God and this decolonization. And I was thinking that we can do decolonization, staying loyal to our believing to God. And I was thinking, is there atheism of decolonization, being not loyal to God? And the parallelism was with group analysis. So it was beyond, was folks, is group analysis in England. So with a lot of suffering, we can do decolonization in our countries about group analysis, but staying loyal to its boundaries and to its main core, I mean, and not like atheism, not like ruining it with footsteps or something like this, or not being loyal to the main core of group analysis. It has a lot of suffering doing decolonization in our countries, because you have to adapt it, we have to develop it, we have to present it to people, and it's just a lot of suffering by soul, but it can be done.
Can you tell people where you are?
Yes, I am from Albania. I am from Tirana, and I live in a small, I'm from Kruja, and I live in a small country here in Albania. And we are the first generation of group analysis in Albania. We are proud of.
It's very interesting what's been said about boundaries as a means of control. And this idea of pushing these issues into a side room. Because I've been much of this past week trying to negotiate with the scientific program committee, who just don't want to have a discussion about how many people can come to this workshop. Because I was getting people contacting me earlier in the week saying, we can't get into your workshop, we're being told it's full. And so I wrote to the organisers and I said, why is it full? What's the limit? You know, is there a technological difficulty? And I got a reply, no, there's no technical difficulty. It's just that the scientific program committee have decided to spread the numbers of every workshop and paper evenly, so you're only allowed 35 people. And I said, but why? What is the point of this ruling? Who wants to present a paper or a workshop to people, half of whom don't want to be there because they'd rather be somewhere else? Why can't people just go to whatever workshop or paper they want to go to? There's no actual technical limit on the thing. But I can't get a reply to that. The reply is just that this is what the Scientific Program Committee has decided. So there's this adherence to some kind of boundary with no apparent reason for having it, except that we always have boundaries, and a refusal to discuss it, which it seems also like some kind of pre-programmed idea that you don't negotiate boundaries. And so, I mean, in a way...
Dick, there are 41 people here.
Sorry?
Dick, there are 41 people here, actually 40 now, but so they obviously gave up that boundary.
No, they moved it. They moved it to 40. When they said they got more people come to the conference.
Dick, I can tell you an answer to this, because I was part of the discussion, or I heard the discussion. It was simply the idea that, oh, wouldn't it be very sad if somebody made all this effort to prepare a paper and then nobody would come. That was the idea behind it.
But I thought, I mean, that's interesting to know that, Angelica, because I thought, well, you know, you could argue against, make an argument against that. But that also when there's the big names, that you could get a flood of people who always will always go to Earl Hopper or whatever, of the big names, and then other marginalized voices giving papers who nobody's heard of before, nobody will go to their papers. So that is it's colonization. So
that was the idea. That was the idea. So I think it's important. It might be a wrong idea, but there was some thought about it.
Sally, that's an important point you bring, because I was thinking, would I have a voice if it was not Dick Blackwell?
Yeah, exactly.
And I had a big question about that as well, because I also have a big question that would we have group analysis in the way we would want to have it if it was not for Art Dalal?
Yeah.
These, and I do think that certain times, I mean, I think it's impossible not to engage in the conversation about power. It's impossible not to engage in it. When we're talking about, when we're talking historically, that the worlds we're going into have been colonized by powers. But it is an important conversation.
Yeah. Status is power, and power gives status.
And sometimes the status and the name means that you wouldn't say what you're thinking. I was interested, Fernando, then you said that when you were speaking to someone at the conference in Berlin, you didn't know who they were, and because of that, you spoke freely.
Yes.
But if you'd known that they were whoever, I don't know who you were speaking to, but some god, that you wouldn't have been able to speak freely. So there is something about power and names and status that is really difficult to get away from, isn't it? And sometimes that's used in the service of development. And, I think, Dick, you do that. But there's also a bit in the way that it's used to control and not discover and explore. Because if you do explore really freely, then something has to change. Because you might discover that there has been a history of groups in India and South Africa, that the Europeans are not bringing something to the countries that they're wanting to colonize in. I mean, all countries have a history of groups. I come from Ireland. I trained in England. But, there's a huge history of doing things in groups. That wouldn't be called group analysis. I mean, but, there's a history, a cultural history of ways of making decisions. And that's true, I imagine, in all sorts of cultures. But that we have and I suppose it's what is it that we're trying to share, maybe, rather than teach or impose? What is it that we think that group analysis has that is of value to other places? What is it? And maybe that's what we have to try and understand. For me, I think at its best, it's about being really able to think about the context you're in, and then use what we've got to do the work. But that context, and I think for me that's one of the most important things about FOOCS, is that the idea of a context. And within a context, a small group in one place will be different from a small group in another. Large, medium, depending on the context and what you're actually trying to do. Are you trying to help people, or are you trying to impose something in a rather rigid way?
I think, again, the word context possibly is also a kind of apolitical notion. You're probably not using it like that.
I think it's the opposite, actually, but yeah, okay.
I just want to come back to Dick's thing that he said, and the way he said it, about a certain decision being taken by the committee, and then what happens. So I'd break that up into two bits. One is the decision they make, which we can argue the rights and wrongs of, whatever their reasoning was. But then there's a second part, which is how they deal with his inquiry, which is a kind of, you know, bureaucratic shutting down or non-responsiveness. You could even call it the analytic response, you know, where you ask the analyst a question and they don't respond to you, kind of thing. And so that kind of, and just let's accept that it is as Dick has described it. So that kind of mute response, is that part of the values of group analysis?
No.
You know, well, some would say, I don't know, you know, I might say no, you might say no, but others might say that is, you know, how a group analyst is and so on. So to me, the decolonizing project is you know, it's such a deep one. It takes apart the very values and premises, you know. So a person earlier from Albania, you were saying, you know, that we shouldn't lose we should stay loyal to the core elements. And that also is a kind of worrying idea to me, to stay loyal to a certain core, because if that core is problematic, you know, in my view, it probably is quite problematic. But the issue we're talking about is being enacted in the relationship of this workshop with the authorities, you know, to call them that, the scientific committee or who are the organizers.
Yeah.
In some way, it's being reproduced, isn't it, here?
The argument is that freedom is dangerous because then somebody might end up presenting a paper to only 5 people. But there's a risk with freedom. You can't control a free society. And I think the issue with decolonizing is a lot to do with what is being held onto out of some kind of tradition of doing things that way. And it's, you know, the colonial aspect is, to me, a kind of underlying theme of how authority is actually exercised.
Yeah.
And how hierarchies are managed. And there's a sort of colonial motif in that's reproduced in London, as much as it could be reproduced with a course being sent out from or run from Europe or London in another part of the world. It's about where the authority is, how the power and authority are going to be managed, and how much is negotiable. And for me, the core of group analysis is that we can have a reflective dialogue on what's going on between us. But there's also a problem about what are the lenses and what's the conceptual framework through which we're going to do the reflecting, which I think was what Patricia was raising in a very important way. What do we mean by these concepts of individuation and various other associated ideas that we all think we know what they mean in England or in Europe, but what do they really mean in different contexts where they may not be at all applicable?
But I'm also sort of interested you brought up the idea of loyalty to the core elements, Farhad, because your book, if anything else, the taking the group seriously really shows the confusion in Fuchs's mind. And I think it's very much to do with who he was and where he came from and his first profession and his second profession and how this has been developed. And I've been sitting here thinking, after you were talking, Patricia, about boundaries being a state of mind, having had quite a lot of difficulty, and Farhad knows about this, on a course I've been convening, where people have been very uncomfortable with the idea that I didn't set very tight boundaries around everything, that they were always there to be thought about and negotiated, and why do we have them anyway? I think this colonial history is really helpful in thinking about that.
And I was thinking about having a problematic core. Okay,
yeah.
If we are loyal to group analysis, it means that we can develop the core too.
Yeah.
It doesn't...
The reflective, yeah, absolutely.
in respect of boundaries, I was thinking, I also come from India. I've lived and worked in UK for a few decades. Going with what Anindo you were saying, more than 500 years ago, something was set up in terms of protecting the boundaries, which made important core elements like Sanskrit and Vedic studies and Vedic chanting, which all happened in groups, survived. Mm-hmm. And how I had to, and several people that I know, compartmentalize and live a compartmentalized existence in UK, preserving what is exclusively Indian and what can be tolerated in terms of the exchange. Mm-hmm. Something about identity at cross sections, I think I'm talking about. So it made me think maybe limits have their value in terms of preserving and keeping it ongoing. Whereas I've heard that in some of the smaller countries in Africa, the traditional languages and cultural attributes have been completely wiped out by colonization. So there's something about preserving things against being plundered.
Yes.
I'm talking about preservation of things. I wanted to weigh in talk experience in the group spaces, which I have found useful. And that was mainly when the leaders of the group would not take offense, in my own experience, take offense to what I would bring as I would have considered to be violent reaction.
Sorry, whoever's speaking, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
It's
problem here. Is Paula there? Is something we can do technically?
Can you hear me now?
Can you put the mic closer to your mouth?
Yeah, we hear you, but
okay, am I audible now?
I think it's the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Because we want
yes,
to hear
that's
you.
better.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
No, it's distorting.
Still distorted?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to talk about something that I had thought in my experience was something that
No, I think it's the connection. Might be the connection.
It's not the microphone, it's the connection.
Yeah, the connection. Oh no.
Useful.
Matudi, maybe if you take your picture off, the connection would be better.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh yeah.
I've taken out the earphones.
It's the connection in the earphones, I'd say.
Yeah, I've taken off the earphones. I don't know if it's better now. I've stopped the video as well.
Yeah, it is better. Yeah, try again.
Try again.
All right. So just a quick point on what I think has been spoken on, and it has to do with what I found to be the importance of diversity in group spaces, and because I think, and I really believe that it enables multiplicity of voices, and when you have a lot of ideas and thoughts coming up, then you have a rich conversation that you can work on and perhaps develop or bring about a different kind of reformation. And it's in that same light that I was thinking about the usefulness of a symposium like this one. Maybe make an attempt at that. Bring voices from different parts of the world other than the common countries where group analysis will come from. And perhaps going with that, what I think will be important will be an encouragement of production of theory in terms of writing or presentations or articles that both that originate from the countries that we're talking about, like South Africa or Rwanda or India, whatever the case may be. And I think another important thing that I had in mind that I wanted to ask was about the role of a person perceived to be a colonizer. And I'm saying a person in this case, it can be an organization. But their role in the project of decolonization, because I agree with what Patricia was saying about empowerment and freedom not being something that's given. That freedom is something that people take, because it's I don't know an experience where people will have been given freedom, for example, and hence I'm wondering about what the role of a decolonizer becomes in the process, in the project of decolonization.
Now we can see you again. You can put your picture on again, Motudi.
Oh, thank you. And congratulations to the speakers and the conveners of the symposium for.
It reminds me, I should have announced earlier, we have got the chat facility here for anybody who wants to contribute something that they can't get a space to say in the discussion. Maybe if you'd like I'm just wondering whether you'd like to put some of your comments, Matudi, onto the chat, because we can read them. It'll be a bit clearer than trying to hear what you're saying when there's all this kind of technical interference.
Oh, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't seem to have the capacity to save the chat, which is a bit of a disaster.
Yeah,
which is unusual.
I didn't catch what you said, Teresa.
Well, usually you can save the chat, but I haven't been able to. I just tried, which is nice to have if people write comments, interesting comments, or any comments, but it doesn't seem to work.
We have a technical host, Paula. Paula, are you there? Can anything be done about that?
Yes, I'm here.
Can anything be done to make the chat savable?
You want the chat able?
No, we want the chat to be able to save the chat.
You want to save the chat?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know if you can see, if you open the chat.
Yeah.
And you have these two first, meaning who do you want to chat with? And then on the right, you have called file, an icon.
Yeah.
If you click here, and you press perhaps to Google Drive.
All right.
You upload files from there. You don't download them.
Oh.
It's like downloading.
Okay.
But there's only one message on the chat, right?
So far.
Okay, 1 second.
Whilst
give me 1 second.
Yeah,
we have 5 minutes left.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Whilst this is technological stuff is going on, I was just thinking that say the British in India, when we talk about colonizing, we think about the British having come over and so on. But right now, there's another colonizing process going on this very moment with the current government in power, this fascistic BJP party.
Yeah.
It's rewriting history books in India, for example, and turning Indian history into Hinduist history, a particular version of Hindu history. So, the colonizing process is going on not just in these frames, but also in other frames as well. And they're very disturbing. Yeah. They're very, very disturbing and troubling.
It would be really good if we could continue these discussions in some way.
Yes.
I have an idea that we should maybe do it just occurred to me, a special edition of group analysis and have voices from different parts of the world on this on the theme of decolonizing specifically group analysis. That would be, you know, as an idea, isn't it?
Yeah. That'd be right.
The editor-elect is nodding her head emphatically. I'm the associate editor and I'm nodding my head emphatically too. So I think we might be able to put that together.
Yeah. But I also would like to continue this discussion.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, there's nothing to stop us setting up a Zoom discussion, you know, in a few weeks' time, and with an open invitation.
Yeah.
Can you do that, Dick?
That'll be great.
Sorry for interrupting, but I was checking the settings, and actually we cannot save those messages since we had to do that on beforehand, before the session start, because it's a general setting of the account.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks for trying.
You're welcome. Sorry.
You can.
I wanted to say something else.
You can just copy the chat if you want to.
I just want to say something else about my experience. You know, Ananda, when you talked about the exotic Indian and how that's the first time you got angry, and there's also something about the exotic Palestinians yesterday. You know, they have such wonderful clothes and so on. That also is a way of not engaging with the situation. And I just remember when I first met you, all these lovely people in Bangalore, where, you know, our trainees and our friends, how excited I was to meet people that were familiar to me, because before that I was visiting family in Mumbai, and I felt they were very, very, you know, I couldn't connect to them, and suddenly there were these people that I connect, and I was so surprised that there were people that I could connect with. So I'm also wondering about class and, you know, what is it, you know, anyway. And I had the same experience with meeting my friends in Palestine, you know. Gosh, the surprise that they were just like me.
I think, Angelica, you're getting at something something really important about this, about how connections are made.
Yes.
And in these ways that are not predictable. And I was really, I mean, this question of what's the core of group analysis or analysis, what is really at the base of it, and beyond everything else, beyond that, everything is adaptable and fluctuating and could grow and change multi-directionally, but is there something, what is that thing at the core of it? It's maybe something that you've touched on here. It's about these feelings of connection.
Regarding continuing this discussion, because we're going to run out of time in a minute. I was thinking, I mean, one option is for people to come to the alternative GASi large group on Sunday midday that is hosted in India, and that seems to have deterred some people from coming. But it's a very international group. Alternatively, we could set up. There could be a separate discussion or meeting set up to carry on some of this discussion here. But I think, you know, given the success of having the large group hosted in India and the number of people from India that it's drawn in, I think if this discussion is going to carry on, it would be better if it happened outside of Europe. And maybe if South Africa or Rwanda could host the a Zoom discussion, that would be a really good way to do it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. It's definitely something to look into. Before my colleagues chop my head off, because I wanted to say we would definitely host this, but I think I better consult with them.
And would you have all our...
There are some of them here, so they can, hey,
Would you have all our emails? Because it's maybe, you know.
No, I wouldn't. I would need to, we would need to organize something.
But I suggest, if people want to participate, that we send our emails to Dick Blackwell, say, and then he has a list, or to me, I don't mind, but if we can just delegate somebody to collate, or to Anando, anybody, and then, you know, so that we have a communication channel, because once we disappear off screen, we're going to disappear and we have no way of reconnecting.
Yes, but people have registered for this workshop, so I'm sure that the emails of those people are there somewhere already.
William Foster, I've come back channel.
I've also copied the chat into Word.
Sorry for interrupting. Okay. It's 2 o'clock, actually 2 minutes over the time. So time to start ending the session.
We have to go, do we?
Boundaries.
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 Sometimes.
Bye.
Anyway,
Okay.
Please send your emails.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.